Trump and Vance versus Zelensky, Part 2. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I'm analysing a section of footage that came from the recent meeting between President Trump and Vice President Vance and President Zelensky. Matters became somewhat heated, and it has resulted in considerable commentary and repercussion thereafter. I'm analysing the behaviour vis-à-vis the narcissistic dynamic between the various personalities in the room to help you understand more about why the individuals are behaving as they do. I make the point again to ensure that anybody who might be hard of understanding, it isn't about criticising one side or the other. A narcissist can be correct, but their motivation for being correct is linked to the pursuit of the prime aims. In essence, the narcissist uses the truth as everybody else understands it to be to get to what they need. In other instances, they will use a half-truth or nowhere near the truth because their version of the truth sometimes coincides with the truth as you understand it to be, but often does not. Irrespective of whether you think Zelensky was there being pushy, that he was seeking more money, that he has been unappreciative for the support that he's been provided, whether you think that the things that were said needed to be said to him but perhaps ought to have been said behind closed doors, whether you think this was an ambush that was designed to humiliate Zelensky, whether you think that Trump and Vance behaved in a bullying way towards him, or that they were just plain speaking and that they're tired of supporting Zelensky and his personal crusade. Ultimately, it doesn't matter which of those views you have, and you are entitled to have them. What I'm looking at is, what is the dynamic between the narcissists in this room? To explain why they behave as they do in relation to one another. One of the interesting aspects has been the fact that Trump has behaved in an unvarnished way. Some people might say, Zelensky needs to be told, but you could have told him all of this behind closed doors. For a narcissist such as Trump, that's not going to wash. The reason being, he doesn't operate with a facade. That is part of why he's successful and part of the reason why many people don't like him. He calls it as it is. Some find that refreshing, some find it awful. Irrespective of which side of that divide you're on, the reason that Trump would do this in front of the world's media is that he is to the point. He doesn't operate with a facade. He's not bothered about the spin. What you see is what you get. And to him, he's simply engaging in behaviour that he sees as appropriate to protect the interests of the United States, irrespective of how it might actually make him look. Because he is about pursuing the result of the subconscious need for control. He doesn't need a facade to enable him to get there. Zelensky is somebody that utilises a facade, hence why he speaks in a more measured tone, although there are times where you can see that his own heated, ignited fury is rising. Trump is direct. He doesn't shout, but he does raise his voice. Similarly, Vance is also in a more measured way, although he speaks more loudly than Zelensky does. But all three are naturally seeking the control over one another because that is what they innately need. Now, let's continue with another section of the footage and analyse what's going on.
It's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war,
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble. Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone. And we are thankful. I said thanks.
You haven't been alone. You haven't been alone. We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and your men are brave, but they had to use our military. If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
Maybe less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing.
You'll recall that in the previous part, Trump and Zelensky were talking over one another, neither really listening properly to what the other was saying, doing so for the purposes of trying to get control over the other. Trump, which is more of his style, was more forceful than Zelensky, who was speaking in a more measured manner. But both were interrupting the other, both were attempting to talk over the other, and Trump had been pointing out that he viewed Zelensky as gambling with millions of people and gambling with World War III, and that he was being disrespectful with regard to his behaviour. Vance then interjects by stating, "Have you said thank you once this entire meeting?" This ultimately might appear as somewhat trivial, or you might think it's an appropriate observation. But whatever you might think of his interjection, the sole purpose of it is provocation. It's being done to belittle Zelensky for the purposes of nullifying the threat to control that he poses by his relentless, terrier-like behaviour. Zelensky responds a lot of times. He simply answers the question to nullify that threat to control. But Vance is persistent. "No, in this meeting, have you said thank you?" Vance then engages in some interesting behaviour because he states, "You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October." Now, here, Vance is bringing up the past. Evidently, the fact that Zelensky campaigned for the Biden administration, which he naturally would do so because that administration was sending him lots of money for the defence of his country, the fact that he campaigned for them is naturally going to annoy Vance as a Republican. However, who won the election? Republicans did. Therefore, you might think, well, that's in the past, let it be. But naturally, Vance's own narcissism looks for something that it can utilise to try and nullify the threat to control that Zelensky poses by his continued talking. And it rummages around in the box of tricks within Vance's mind and plucks out the fact that he campaigned for the opposition back in October. Now, understand the type of narcissist that Vance is. He has not sat there brooding on this. That's not how it works. He hasn't sat there bearing a grudge since October, thinking, if I ever meet Zelensky, I'm going to point out to him that he campaigned for the Biden administration because he's been a bad, bad boy. No. In the course of this meeting, Zelensky is threatening Vance's need for control, and therefore Vance's own narcissism needs to find something to nullify that threat to control. It therefore brings up the past and brings up the fact of Zelensky campaigning for the opposition. You might think that Vance, having won the election, would simply let it go, let it slide, but his narcissism won't allow him to do so. It's something that he can rap Zelensky over the knuckles with, and therefore he does so. He continues by saying, "You should offer some words of appreciation for the USA, for a president who is trying to save your country." He triangulates Zelensky with the United States. He triangulates Zelensky with Trump. He flatters Trump by describing him as such. Again, he might be utilising the truth, but the motivation for doing so is the necessity of control. He's berating Zelensky like a naughty schoolboy for not being appreciative towards his family. Zelensky then responds and explains, "Please, if you think that you'll speak very loudly." Clearly, he takes issue with the way that he's being spoken to and the forceful manner in the way that Vance is speaking. Trump immediately interjects. He's not speaking very loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble. No, you've done a lot of talking. Again, he seeks to nullify the threat to control that Zelensky poses by telling him essentially to shut up, that you're not going to get any more talking done. He adds, "Your country is in big trouble." Zelensky responds with, I know, almost again like a child being admonished by his parents. Donald Trump explains, "You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out of this okay, because of us." Zelensky continues He states, Mr. President, in our country we are staying strong. We have been alone. Again, Trump interrupts him, showing a lack of boundary recognition, because Trump takes issue with what Zelensky is saying, and thus it threatens his need for control. And he states, you haven't been alone. Notice that there was a physical assertion of control by Trump, that he touched him on the arm when he said that. Trump is quite tactile with the people. For instance, I mentioned in a separate video about him holding Starmer's hand. He said, come here. And he often will touch people on the shoulder, pat them on the back, etc. That is his use of a physical means to assert control over them. Zelensky, of course, is suggesting that they're alone with regard to them being the only nation that is fighting. And Trump is also correct, however, by saying, well, you haven't been alone because we've been providing you with substantial help. So, in a sense, they are both right, and both as narcissists, they are naturally going to see that they are both right. Zelensky, operating from the premise that they have been alone because they are the only nation that's doing the fighting, makes that point. Trump takes issue with that. It doesn't fit with his perspective, and therefore he points out, we gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. Now, note, here is quite typical behaviour of a narcissist, claiming credit for the money that has been sent, i.e. we gave you the help, but I'll also get a jab in at the previous holder of this office by calling him stupid. Again, whether you agree that Biden is stupid or whether you think that he ought not to have said that about him is ultimately irrelevant. The fact is, the insult is used for the purposes of asserting control over Biden by smearing him in that way, and also by pointing out to Zelensky that he hasn't been alone. There then follows, as the two of them battle for control, talking over one another. Trump persists. If you hadn't had our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks. Zelensky is dismissive. Here, his ignited fury is coming more to the surface as he waves a hand in the air dismissively and states, I've heard it from Putin. It would be over in 3 days. i.e., I've heard this all before, Donald. Stop banging on about it. Maybe less, suggests Donald Trump. The three personalities are all seeking to take control. What you'll notice, though, is that when Vance speaks, Trump falls silent. When Trump speaks, Vance falls silent. They don't interrupt one another. They support one another. There's a cementation between those two narcissists. Yet with Zelensky, he finds himself having to interrupt them and being interrupted himself. Zelensky finds that they talk over him and he talks over them. As when he's dealing with Trump, there are instances where they're clearly not listening to one another, and ditto with Vance. Let's look at some more of the footage.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Again, just say thank you.
I said a lot of times
Accept
to American people.
Accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I understand, sir.
I think it's
I
very
understand.
important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire. I want a ceasefire because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about a ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me. That wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden who was not a smart person. That was with Obama.
It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Mr. Vice President.
The heated nature of the exchange continues, with Zelensky saying, of course he has. Trump then addresses the cameras, stating, it's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this, I tell you. Vance then speaks, stating, "If you can just say thank you," again, harking on this necessity of Zelensky showing thanks. At this point, Zelensky's heated, ignited fury surfaces as he responds with voice raised, "I've said it a lot of times to the American people." Vance continues, "Accept there are disagreements. Let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you are wrong. We know that you are wrong." He seeks to put Zelensky in his place with that observation, again, naturally, looking to assert control over him. Donald Trump jumps in and states, "You see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on." Vance naturally agrees with him, stating, "Yes, I do." Trump continues, "That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful." Once again, this is the narcissist in Trump claiming credit for allowing the exchange to continue. The thought has occurred to him that this is useful to be transparent so people can see this exchange. Many people might form the view this is a rather unedifying spectacle of two heads of state arguing and a vice president who keeps demanding that you express thanks. Some might say that it looks more like a playground disagreement with two people bullying the other. Others may form the view, well, it's refreshing to actually see some honesty going on with a frank exchange of views. But remember that what is happening here is that Trump instantly wants to claim credit for allowing it to continue in the way that it has done. Well, I think it had its own momentum, didn't it? He wasn't allowing it to continue. It just was. Nevertheless, Donald Trump is always going to seize an opportunity to demonstrate that he is the one that has done something correct. Zelensky expresses again the fact that he is thankful, and Trump rounds on him once again. "You don't have the cards." Again, Zelensky and Trump start to talk over one another. He then mocks Zelensky by saying, "I don't want a ceasefire, I don't want a ceasefire, I want this." He turns to him, admonishing him like a naughty child. "Look, if you can get a ceasefire right now, you take it." Important to point out, Trump may well be entirely correct in what he's saying, but the reason that he's saying it in this context is because he needs to nullify the threat to control that Zelensky faces because of his argumentative nature. Zelensky responds, "Of course we want to stop the war." He suggests, "Ask our people what they think of a ceasefire." Trump deflects that. "That wasn't me. That wasn't with me. A guy named Biden who was not a smart person." Once again, Trump demonstrates the absence of a facade and the way that he'll use insult. He's called Biden stupid. He's referred to him as not being smart. Once again, you might take the view that he's entirely correct in what he's saying, but you might also question whether it's appropriate for a head of state to be using such language in a discussion such as this, essentially utilising what appear to be playground insults for the previous holder of office. You may well think that about Biden, but you might consider that it would be better expressed privately rather than a televised exchange with another head of state. It doesn't come across as particularly statesmanlike. But the purpose of which it's said is, of course, to assert control over Biden by smearing him, and to deflect from the question that Zelensky asked, which threatened his need for control. Zelensky, however, persists, once again demonstrating his argumentative nature, and as I've described him, a little bit like a terrier. He says it was your president. I think the point he's making there is to suggest that when he says your, he means the United States. Trump responds, "That was with Obama." Trump then compares his military provision of hardware to that of Obama, pointing out that his has been far more successful. Again, that may well be entirely correct, but yet again, Trump will point that out in order to denigrate Obama, smearing him, whilst making himself look good. Remember, the narcissist can use the truth, but when the narcissist uses the truth as you understand it to be, it is for the narcissist's own purposes. At that juncture, Zelensky looks away, fed up. Trump continues, "You've got to be more thankful. Let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards." I then ended the exchange before a question is posed of Vance. What this demonstrates is three narcissists all arguing with one another. Two, where there is a form of cementation between them because they're on the same side, in effect ganging up on the third. Irrespective of what you might think about whether people should behave like this when they hold such positions, whether you might think that it is an unedifying behaviour, or whether you think, no, it is actually refreshing and appropriate to see this. Let's have some honesty here. Remember, what's going on is there are three individuals that all need to assert control over the other individuals in the room. Vance does it by way of agreement with Trump, by flattering him, and he seeks control over Zelensky by repeatedly asking him to be thankful and to demonstrate thanks, which is rather belittling and somewhat chiding of him. Trump is true to form. He's bombastic, he's belligerent, he makes points, some of which may well be entirely accurate, others perhaps less so. But he demonstrates his lack of patience and his straightforward manner as he seeks to bulldoze Zelensky. His usual modus operandi of behaving like that wrecking ball is evident as he seeks control. Zelensky, a different type of narcissist, needles. He's argumentative. He keeps pressing. He keeps talking. He keeps interrupting. He won't give sway either. And the result is that neither would be necessarily particularly satisfied with what has gone on in that room. But for the rest of us, it's an excellent opportunity to watch as three narcissists vie for control amongst themselves. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for watching.